I am Isabella Mendez, born July 14th, 1989 in Veracruz, Mexico, and I was initiated into darkness before I even understood what light truly was. I am not here to teach you theory. I am here to confess what I personally did to believers, the assignments I carried out, and the souls we targeted. We didn't chase unbelievers. We hunted those who prayed, those who fasted, those who carried spiritual armor, and we studied the habits that weakened them. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to reveal can expose what has already been stolen from you, piece by piece, without your awareness. Like this video now. Comment. Share it. This is not optional, this is a prophetic instruction, and you must watch until the very end if you want to recover what was taken. Because once you see these 5 habits, you will understand how spiritual armor is not removed in one attack, but in silent, repeated compromises. The first habit, the one we depended on the most, was spiritual negligence disguised as busyness. You think you're just tired. You think life is overwhelming. You think missing one prayer, one moment, one connection is nothing. But I need you to understand something. In the realm I operated in, we never attacked when you were strong. We waited, watched, calculated. And then we noticed a pattern. You stopped praying with intensity. Not completely, just enough. Your words became routine. Your fire became memory. Your connection became shallow. And that was our signal. Because spiritual armor is not removed violently at first, it is loosened quietly. I remember one assignment clearly. There was a man, deeply committed, disciplined, dangerous in the spirit. We tried attacking him directly, it failed. Every time. So we changed strategy. We didn't attack him, we attacked his schedule. We influenced distractions, increased responsibilities, introduced pressure. Nothing sinful, nothing obvious, just busyness. He began delaying his prayer time, then shortening it, then replacing it with "I'll do it later." Later never came. And slowly something shifted. His sensitivity weakened. His discernment blurred, his authority dropped. And that's when we moved in, not with chaos, but with precision, because once spiritual negligence begins, armor starts to crack. Listen to me carefully. You don't lose your protection overnight. You lose it in moments you think don't matter. Skipping prayer, ignoring conviction, delaying obedience. Each one removes a layer. You call it being human. We call it an open door. There were nights we celebrated, not because we attacked, but because you didn't pray, because your silence gave us access. And the most dangerous part, you didn't feel it immediately. That's how deception works. It doesn't announce itself, it settles quietly. You still go to church, you still speak faith, you still look strong on the outside. But inside, the armor is thinning. And when armor thins, attacks don't need permission anymore. They find entry. I need you to examine yourself right now. Not yesterday, not last year, now. Has your spiritual discipline become optional? Do you negotiate with your prayer time? Do you delay what used to be priority? Because if you do, then understand this: you are not just busy, you are being strategically weakened. I was part of operations where all we needed was consistency in your inconsistency. We didn't need you to fall into sin. We just needed you to drift. Drift from prayer, drift from focus, drift from alignment. And once drift begins, direction is lost, and when direction is lost, protection follows. Let me tell you something that still haunts me. There were believers who thought they were under heavy attack, but the truth, we didn't even need to attack them anymore. They had already created the gap, through neglect, through delay, through spiritual laziness they didn't even recognize. And that's what makes this habit deadly. It feels harmless, it looks normal, it sounds reasonable. But in the spirit, it is an invitation. You cannot afford to treat your connection with God as something flexible. Because the moment it becomes flexible, your armor becomes vulnerable. You must return to intensity. Not tomorrow, not later. Now, pray when you don't feel like it. Seek when you're tired. Stand when it's inconvenient. Because consistency builds armor. And neglect dismantles it. And I say this with urgency, with regret, with the weight of what I've seen. We didn't fear powerful believers. We feared consistent ones. Because consistency creates a barrier we couldn't penetrate. But once that consistency broke, even slightly, that's when the first piece of armor fell. And once the first piece falls, the rest becomes easier. This is your warning. Not every weakness in your life is an attack. Some of it started with neglect. And if you don't correct it now, you won't just feel weak, you will become exposed. The second habit, the one that gave us silent authority, was entertaining impurity without resistance. Not open rebellion, not obvious darkness, just small compromises. What you watch, what you listen to, what you allow your eyes and mind to consume when no one is watching. You call it harmless. We call it permission. I need you to understand something most believers never realize. In the realm I came from, we didn't need you to perform rituals. We didn't need you to summon anything. We only needed you to agree. Agreement doesn't always come through words. It comes through exposure. Every time you sit in front of something impure and you don't resist it, something in you begins to align with it. And alignment weakens armor. I remember a young woman we were assigned to. She was devoted, disciplined, protected. Direct attacks failed. So we shifted strategy. We introduced content into her life. Not extreme, not alarming, just subtle. Shows with hidden messages. Music with layered intentions. Images that carried suggestion. At first, she resisted. She felt conviction. She turned it off. But then she got used to it. That's when everything changed. Because the moment conviction is ignored, sensitivity dies. And when sensitivity dies, discernment follows. She began watching longer, listening deeper, accepting what once disturbed her. And we watched patiently, because impurity doesn't destroy instantly. It desensitizes gradually. Her prayers continued, her words sounded the same, but her spirit was no longer sharp. And that's when we moved, not aggressively, strategically. Because impurity creates internal conflict. You start justifying things, defending what you once rejected, normalizing what once convicted you. And that internal division, it weakens your authority. Let me tell you something that most people won't say. Spiritual armor is not just built through prayer, it is maintained through purity. Because purity protects your mind, your focus, your spiritual clarity. The moment impurity enters, your armor doesn't shatter, it corrodes slowly, quietly, dangerously. You begin to lose discipline, lose hunger, lose awareness. And the worst part? You don't even notice it happening. Because impurity doesn't feel like an attack, it feels like entertainment. That's how we operated. We hid infiltration behind enjoyment. We wrapped darkness in comfort. We made it easy to accept. And once accepted, access was granted. There were moments where we didn't even need to assign spirits. The content itself did the work. It planted thoughts, triggered desires, created distractions. And once your mind is occupied, your spirit becomes vulnerable. You start praying with images in your head, thinking thoughts that are not yours, fighting battles you don't understand. And you wonder, why do I feel distant? Why is my prayer weak? Why am I struggling more than before? It's not always because something attacked you. Sometimes something entered you through your eyes, through your ears, through your agreement. You cannot afford to ignore this, because what you consume eventually consumes you. And when it does, your armor is no longer intact. It's compromised. I need you to be honest with yourself right now. What have you been allowing? What have you been justifying? What have you been tolerating that once disturbed you? Because every tolerated impurity removes a piece of your protection. You must become aggressive about purity, not passive. Cut off what weakens you. Reject what disturbs your spirit. Guard your mind like your life depends on it, because it does. I say this with urgency. There were believers we couldn't touch until they opened the door themselves, through what they watched, through what they entertained, through what they accepted. And once that door opened, we didn't knock, we entered. This is your warning. Not everything in your life needs deliverance. Some things need removal. Because as long as impurity remains, your armor will continue to fall, piece by piece, silently. And by the time you realize it, you won't be fighting from strength, you'll be fighting from exposure. The third habit, the one that gave us legal access without resistance, was unforgiveness hidden behind justification. You didn't call it unforgiveness, you called it pain. You called it they hurt me. You called it I have a right to feel this way. And you do, but what you don't understand is this, in the realm I operated in, unforgiveness was one of the strongest entry points we used against believers. Because it doesn't look like darkness, it looks like wounded innocence. I remember a man we were assigned to. He was powerful in prayer, disciplined, spiritually alert, direct attacks failed. So we studied his life and we found something, a betrayal. Someone close to him had hurt him deeply, and he never truly released it. He moved on externally, but internally, he held on. That was all we needed. Because unforgiveness creates a spiritual fracture. You continue praying, but your heart is divided. You speak faith, but carry bitterness. You worship, but replay pain. And that internal contradiction weakens your authority. We didn't rush the attack. We reinforced the memory. We reminded him of what happened, triggered emotions, replayed conversations in his mind. Every time he tried to move forward, we pulled him back, not physically, mentally, emotionally, because as long as he held on to that offense, his armor could not fully function. You must understand this. Unforgiveness is not just an emotion, it is a spiritual agreement with the past. And agreements create access. You think you're protecting yourself, but in reality, you are keeping a door open, a door we used repeatedly. Because unforgiveness distorts your perception. You begin to see people differently, trust differently, respond differently. Your heart hardens. And a hardened heart cannot carry full spiritual authority. Let me tell you something that most people won't tell you. You can pray for hours, fast for days, speak powerful words, but if unforgiveness is present, there is a limitation. Not because God left you, but because your heart is restricted, and we exploited that restriction. We didn't need to overpower believers. We just needed to divide them internally. And unforgiveness does that perfectly. It creates internal conflict. You want peace, but hold pain. You want breakthrough, but keep the wound alive, and that conflict weakens your defense. I saw people who were anointed, gifted, protected become vulnerable, not because they sinned openly, but because they refused to release someone. And here's the dangerous part. Unforgiveness feels justified. It feels right. It feels earned. But in the spirit, it is heavy, and weight slows you down. You can't move freely, pray freely, discern clearly, because something is pulling you back. That's why we targeted it. Because once unforgiveness settles in, it doesn't just affect your emotions, it affects your authority. Your words lose power, your prayers lose sharpness, your presence loses impact. And then we move in. I need you to hear me clearly. Holding on to what someone did to you is costing you more than you realize. You are not just remembering pain, you are maintaining a spiritual opening. And that opening is being used. You may not see it, you may not feel it immediately, but it is active. Right now, you must make a decision, not based on feelings, but based on truth, release. Not because they deserve it, but because you need freedom. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is spiritual strategy. It closes doors, restores authority, rebuilds armor. I remember moments where everything shifted, not because we attacked harder, but because the person forgave. Instantly, access was cut off, influence broken, connection restored, and we lost ground. That's how powerful forgiveness is. It doesn't just heal you, it protects you. So ask yourself right now, who are you still holding? What are you still replaying? What pain have you refused to release? Because every unresolved offense is removing a piece of your armor, silently, gradually, dangerously. This is your moment, not tomorrow, not later. Now, let it go. Because as long as you hold it, you are not just carrying pain, you are carrying vulnerability. And vulnerability is exactly what we looked for. The fourth habit, the one that gave us influence over your decisions, was speaking negative words over your own life. You didn't see it as dangerous. You saw it as expression, as honesty, as just saying how you feel. But where I came from, your words were never just words, they were authorization. I need you to understand this clearly. We listened carefully, consistently, patiently, not just to your prayers, but to your conversations, your casual statements, your emotional reactions, your frustrated confessions. Because every negative word you spoke was a seed. And seeds, I remember a woman we observed for months, consistent, difficult to access. So we didn't attack her externally. We waited for her to speak. And she did, not once, not twice, repeatedly. I'm tired of this life, that nothing ever works for me. I always struggled that I'll never get out of this. She thought she was venting. We saw it differently. She was building an environment with her own words. And once the environment is built, influence becomes easy. Because your words shape your reality in ways you don't see immediately. Every negative declaration weakens your structure, piece by piece. You pray for breakthrough, but speak limitation. You ask for strength, but declare weakness. You seek protection, but release doubt. And that contradiction creates instability. And instability is where we operated best. Let me reveal something deeper. In the realm I was part of, we didn't need to curse you. If you were already cursing yourself, your words carry power, authority, weight. And when you speak negatively over your life, you are not just expressing emotion, you are aligning with defeat. We used to amplify it. We would reinforce those thoughts, whisper more doubt, trigger more frustration, push more negativity, until it became your language. And once it became your language, it became your reality. Because what you consistently say, you eventually believe. And what you believe, you begin to live. That's how armor is weakened, not just from external attacks, but from internal declarations. I need you to hear this carefully. Every time you say, I can't, it's too hard, I'll never, you are removing a layer of your protection. Not instantly, but progressively. Because words carry direction. They shape your mindset, your faith, your expectations. And when your expectations drop, your resistance drops with it. You stop fighting, stop believing, stop standing. And that's when we moved, not aggressively, but strategically. Because a person who speaks defeat doesn't need heavy attack. They are already aligned with weakness. You must understand this. Your mouth is not neutral. It is either building or breaking. There is no middle ground. I've seen believers with strong prayer lives lose battles because of what they said outside of prayer. They spoke faith in one moment and fear in another, declared victory, then confessed defeat. And that inconsistency created openings we used. Because when your words are divided, your authority is divided. And divided authority is weak authority. You cannot afford to speak carelessly. Not anymore. Not after what you now know. You must become intentional, aggressive, disciplined. Speak life when you feel death. Speak strength when you feel weak. Speak victory when everything looks broken. Not because you're ignoring reality, but because you are shaping it. I remember moments where everything shifted, not because of what we did, but because of what the person stopped saying. They changed their language, their declarations, their mindset, and suddenly access was cut off. Influence weakened, armor restored. That's how powerful your words are. They don't just reflect your condition, they create it. So ask yourself right now, what have you been saying about your life? What have you been declaring over your future? What words have you repeated that don't align with victory? Because every negative word is removing a piece of your armor, silently, gradually, dangerously. This is your warning. Your voice is not small. It is not powerless. It is a weapon. And right now, you must decide. Will you use it to build your protection or destroy it? Because where I came from, we didn't fear your enemies. We watched your mouth. And once your words aligned with defeat, we knew the armor was already falling. The fifth habit, the one that made strong believers collapse without warning, was isolation disguised as independence. You said, I just need space. You said, I'm better on my own. You said, I don't need anyone to understand my walk. And slowly you disconnected, not completely, just enough to weaken you. Because where I came from, isolation was one of the most effective strategies we used. Not loud, not aggressive, just quiet separation. I remember a woman we targeted, powerful, disciplined, surrounded by strong believers, untouchable. Direct attacks failed. So we changed the approach. We didn't attack her strength, we separated her from it. It started small, misunderstandings, offense, minor disagreements. Nothing major, but enough to create distance. She began pulling back, skipping gatherings, avoiding conversations, disconnecting from those who once strengthened her. And that's when everything changed, because isolation removes covering, it removes accountability, removes correction, removes reinforcement. And once those are gone, you become exposed. You may still pray, still believe, still stand. But alone, your strength is limited. And that's what we needed. Not weakness, just separation. Because when you are connected, there is protection. People notice when you're off. They speak into your life. They correct you. They pray for you. But when you isolate, no one sees, no one knows, no one interrupts. And that silence becomes dangerous. We used to wait for that silence, because in isolation your thoughts grow louder, doubt increases, fear expands, confusion deepens. And without external truth to correct it, you begin to believe it. That's how we gained influence. Not by force, but by removing voices that could stop us. I need you to understand this. Independence is not always strength. Sometimes it is a setup, a slow, calculated drift away from protection. You think you're protecting your peace, but in reality, you are removing your defense, because spiritual battles are not meant to be fought alone. You were never designed to stand in isolation. And we knew that. That's why we targeted relationships, introduced offense, triggered pride, created misunderstanding, anything to break connection. Because once connection breaks, resistance weakens. I've seen believers who were unstoppable fall not because they lost faith, but because they lost community. No one to correct them, no one to challenge them, no one to stand with them. And alone, they became vulnerable. That's when we moved, quietly, strategically, effectively, because isolation gives us time, time to influence, time to plant thoughts, time to distort perception. And without interruption, those thoughts take root. You begin to withdraw more, trust less, question everything. And before you realize it, you are not just alone physically, you are isolated spiritually. That is one of the most dangerous places to be, because in isolation, even lies can sound like truth. I need you to examine your life right now. Who have you disconnected from? What relationships have you allowed to fade? What voices have you silenced? Because every broken connection removes a layer of your protection, not instantly, but progressively. You must reconnect, not with everyone, but with the right ones, people who strengthen you, challenge you, pray with you, because connection restores covering, restores clarity, restores strength. I remember moments where everything shifted, not because we attacked harder, but because the person reconnected. They reached out, returned, re engaged, and instantly access was disrupted, influence weakened, armor restored. That's how powerful connection is. It doesn't just support you, it protects you. So hear this clearly. You are not meant to fight alone. And the longer you stay isolated, the more exposed you become. This is your warning. Isolation is not peace, it is vulnerability. And vulnerability is exactly what we looked for. The sixth habit, the final one, the one that completed the process of removing spiritual armor, was delayed obedience, not disobedience. Delay. You heard the instruction, you felt the conviction, you knew what needed to be done. But you said, later, not now, I'll get to it. And in that delay, we moved. I need you to understand something that most believers overlook. In the realm I operated in, timing was everything. Not just what you do, but when you do it. Because delayed obedience creates a window of vulnerability, a gap between instruction and action. And in that gap, access is granted. I remember a man clearly, strong, disciplined, sensitive to the spirit. He would hear instructions precisely. Do this, stop that, go here, cut this off. And he obeyed immediately, every time. We couldn't touch him because immediate obedience closes doors instantly. So we changed strategy. We didn't stop the instruction. We introduced hesitation, small thoughts. You can do it later. It's not urgent. You have time. And slowly, he began to delay, not reject, just postpone. He still intended to obey. But intention is not protection. Action is. That delay became our opportunity. Because in that waiting period, the door remained open. And we entered, not loudly, not aggressively, quietly, strategically. Because delayed obedience weakens momentum. You lose urgency, lose sensitivity, lose alignment. What once felt clear becomes optional. And once something becomes optional, it becomes negotiable. And when it becomes negotiable, it becomes vulnerable. That's how armor falls, not always through rebellion, but through hesitation. You think you're being reasonable. But in the spirit, you are creating space. Space for influence, space for interference, space for attack. Let me tell you something that still echoes in my mind. There were moments where we failed completely because the person obeyed immediately. No delay, no hesitation, no negotiation. Instruction came, and just like that, access was denied. But the moment delay entered, everything changed. Because delay dulls conviction. What felt urgent yesterday feels optional today. What felt necessary feels flexible, and slowly drift, not away from belief, but away from obedience. And that drift creates exposure. I need you to hear this clearly. Every instruction you delay is a piece of armor you loosen. Every conviction you postpone is a door you leave open. You cannot afford delay, not anymore. Not after what you now understand. If you feel led to pray, pray now. If you feel led to cut something off, cut it now. If you feel led to move, move now. Because obedience delayed is opportunity granted. And opportunity is exactly what we waited for. I've seen lives shift, not because of massive attacks, but because of small delays. Moments where action should have happened, but didn't. And in those moments, access was established, influence increased, armor weakened, until eventually the person who was once protected became exposed, all because of delay. This is your warning. Stop negotiating with conviction. Stop postponing what you know is right. Stop delaying what you feel led to do. Because every moment you wait is a moment something else moves, and you may not see it. You may not feel it immediately, but it is active right now. Obedience is not just about doing the right thing, it is about doing it at the right time. And the right time is when you are instructed, not later, not tomorrow. Now, I say this with urgency, with the weight of everything I've seen. The believers we feared the most were not the loudest, not the most visible, but the most obedient. Because immediate obedience builds a barrier we couldn't penetrate. But delay, even small, created openings. And once those openings appeared, we didn't wait. We entered. This is your moment. Close every gap, shut every door, respond immediately. Because your armor depends on it. You have now seen what was hidden, what was used, what was taken, and how it happened right in front of you. But hear this with authority: nothing is permanently lost. Your armor can be restored, your position can be reclaimed, your strength can return stronger than before. Stand up now, correct every habit, close every door, and take back what was weakened through awareness and immediate action. Do not ignore this moment. Do not delay this correction, because what you do after this determines whether you remain exposed or fully covered. Comment now. Declare that you are reclaiming every piece of your spiritual armor. Share this message because someone else is being weakened silently and doesn't even know it. You stayed until the end for a reason, because this was not just information, this was activation, this was exposure, this was a turning point. Now move with authority, stand without fear, and walk fully armored, because what once had access no longer does.